You're watching Al Jazeera. It's just gone past 11:30 GMT, day 11 of the US-Israel war on Iran, a conflict that has already spread to large parts of the Middle East and is threatening global fuel supplies. These are the latest developments. President Donald Trump has said the US and Israel are close to completing their objectives in Iran and that the war will end very soon, but not this week. Iran's Revolutionary Guard has dismissed his comments as nonsense. Global markets have shown signs of rebounding. Investors are optimistic the war on Iran could end soon following the comments from President Trump. Early trading shows a dip in oil prices has helped Asian markets. But people in Iran have been experiencing some of the most intense bombardments since the US and Israel's attacks began. There were major explosions overnight in Karaj, close to the capital, Tehran. Several homes were destroyed. Well, to discuss these latest developments, I'm now joined by Gideon Levy, a columnist at Haaretz newspaper. He's in Tel Aviv, and Scott Lucas, professor of US and international politics at the University College Dublin, is joining us from Ireland. Thank you both very much for joining us. Gideon, let me start with you, if I can, about President Trump's comments suggesting that the war will end soon and that this will be a mutual decision with Prime Minister Netanyahu. Is that the case? How closely aligned are Washington and Israel right now on how and when this war should end?
Washington and Israel are very close now, but there is only one person who will decide when will this war end, like there was only one person who decided when will it start, namely President Donald Trump. Israel is quite a partner for this adventure, but the last word will be Trump's word, no doubt about it.
Scott Lucas, your thoughts? Do you agree with that the last word on when the war should end will be Trump's decision?
Yeah, Israel can't continue without Trump's support. But the problem here is using Trump's words as a marker of where we are. The statements that are being headlined that, the war is very close to an end. He also said in the same conversations, well, we've won, but we have to win more. Mm-hmm. And this is going to go farther. The reality here is that Trump was rattled yesterday. He was rattled by the surge in oil prices. He was rattled, as James Bays explained, by the effects on stock markets. He's rattled because there's domestic pressure against these military operations. And so he was sort of throwing this out. Hey, everybody, don't worry. It's going to be over quite soon. But then in the next breath saying, but we've got to make sure that we crush the regime. And those two things are not compatible.
Certainly mixed messages from the administration. Gideon Levy, on the objectives, we've heard from Israel's ambassador to France in the last hour saying that the objective is to weaken Iranian authorities so people can take control of their own fate. And we've heard from President Trump that the US and Israel are close to completing their objectives. But are the objectives the same from Israel's perspective? What exactly are the objectives and have they really been achieved?
First of all, there are the declared objectives, which also changed both in the United States and in Israel. And there are the visible objective, because the declared objective of changing the regime in Iran, and by the way, not knowing who is going to replace the current regime, seems right now is unachievable. It takes some time for both leaders to realize it, I guess. Maybe Donald Trump realized it already, and maybe also Netanyahu will realize it soon. But it doesn't seem, because this regime will not fall in one day. Maybe we started the process now to weaken it. So you will see all kinds of declarations in the coming days in order to get down from this high tree that they both climbed on, in order to save face and say that many things were achieved. Practically, I'm very skeptical about those achievements of this war, but let time speak. Let's wait until it ends.
Scott Lucas, as you said, domestic political considerations are also at play here as far as President Trump is concerned, the economy as well. How can he save face, as Gideon says, to exit this war in a way that he doesn't come out as a loser in this?
Well, I mean, the Trump camp objectives was slightly different from Israel, whereas they didn't necessarily want regime change. They wanted regime surrender, the regime to give up its nuclear program entirely, to give up its ballistic missile program, to break its alliances in the Middle East. The problem here is that the regime doesn't appear to be even giving way on those conditions. So where's the off-ramp? The off-ramp, the only countries I think that have leverage here are the Gulf states. That's because of Trump's personal investments, his family investments for the Gulf states. It's because of oil, U.S. bases, strategic interest. Qatar has been trying to mediate for the past week to find an opening with the Trump camp. They haven't gotten it so far. But if the domestic situation worsens for Trump, then there may be that opening for the Gulf states to say, look, we need to pull back on this. That is especially true if oil prices, which did drop last night, if there is another surge in them in the days to come.
Gideon, do you agree with that the Gulf states have leverage here? And do they have any leverage at all with Israel if the objectives, as you both seem to agree, are different?
Yeah, they have leverage, but it is limited. We have to realize that before the war, at least on the surface, they were all pushing Trump not to go for this war, and he quite ignored them. Later on, we heard that Saudi Arabia spoke in 2 languages, but about Qatar and the Emirates and the others, I'm not sure they spoke in 2 languages. I guess they were really objecting this war, and Donald Trump ignored them. So their leverage is very limited. So is Israel. Israel is extremely influential for the decision to go to this war. I have my doubts that Israel will have the same influence about ending it, but maybe. We are dealing, and again, we have to say it, we are dealing with an unpredictable and not always consistent decision maker, namely Donald Trump, and therefore all the forecasts might be wrong.
Do you think the fact that the objectives, Gideon, I want to ask you this, the fact that the objectives on both sides, from the Israelis and Americans, seem to be different here, does this expose the limits of the partnership? And do you think this is a real test now for the relationship if they cannot agree on when and how to end this war?
No, I don't think so, Folly. I think that what is challenged, or what should be the consequence, is to understand not the limits of the relationship between Israel and the United States, but finally and once for all, to understand the limits of using military capabilities as efficient and as strong and sophisticated they are. They have their limits. Time after time, Israel is launching wars and achieves very little, if at all. We have seen 2.5 years in Gaza, which led almost to nothing. Now it is Lebanon, destroying Lebanon. I doubt it that any achievement will be there. And same also with this war.
Yeah, briefly, Gideon, I want to ask you before I go back to Scott, whether in Israel there's a debate right now about whether the war has gone far enough or whether it risks becoming a prolonged regional conflict. As you mentioned, Israel is engaged in Gaza still. In Lebanon now, we're seeing it as well. Is there a debate right now within Israel that this has gone on for too long?
No debate whatsoever. 94% of the Jewish Israelis support this war. The Israelis always support wars, at least at their beginnings. And any debate is almost illegitimate. The Israeli discourse cannot contain now any doubts or any question marks.
Okay, Scott Lucas, your thoughts finally on how this ends, and if there are disagreements in the objectives between Israel and the US, how serious is that, and what could it mean to ending the war?
I think Gideon's right that you're still going to have the Trump partnership with Israel, even if the Trump folks say to Israel at some point, look, we've got to pull back from this. And I think that there's already a wobble, I think, from the Netanyahu government saying, oh, it's the Iranian people who have to rise up now. But I think, cut to the chase here, when Donald Trump and his inner circle believe that they have lost a lot of the American people, and 56% of Americans already oppose this war, if the global oil price goes back well over $100 and approaches $150 per barrel, when the U.S. stock markets start coming down, and when you threaten to basically add to not only the U.S. economic problems, but a global economic crisis, that's when they stop. You just have to have someone help them stop and try to save face.
Gentlemen, thank you both for a very interesting discussion. Gideon, Levy, Scott Lucas, thank you for joining us on Al Jazeera.
Thank you.
Thank you.